Tell us the Laridan history about your agent scout. How does it actually work?
It's a tool for CIOs and CFOs to understand what's actually happening internally around AI in their organization. How are their employees using it? A whole bunch of things.
10x are better than the other. Is it a training or awareness problem?
Part of it is awareness, part of it is training.
An employee refuses to adapt the AI. Like, what is your stance on that? Like, should we fire them or should we train them?
It depends on the job, it depends on the function, it depends on whatever.
What is the biggest lie these leaders are actually telling themselves? Hi everyone, this is Amir. I'm the COO and co-founder at PureLogics. Welcome to another episode of PureLogics Pulse. Today we have got a very interesting topic, and that is AI reality check and what leaders need to get right in 2026. And to discuss this topic, we have got a very dynamic personality, a serial entrepreneur, a man who has this habit to see the future before anyone else. He's a serial entrepreneur. So he has this incredible history of building great companies. He reshaped the ad tech industry with Edify and sold that company at staggering $300 million. And then he transformed dynamic employee communication through dynamic signal and also had a massive exit. He also served the board of director at Udemy, and now he's taking on AI enterprises crisis through his new startup called Laridan. And recently they have raised around $17 million in Series A funding from the VCs like 𝐒𝐴16𝐸. Welcome, Russell, to the show. How are you today?
Hi, thank you.
Hi. Could you please tell us the Laridan history and your agent scout? How does it actually work?
Sure. So we started the company, a little more than a year ago, myself and I have a co-founder I've worked with for more than 25 years. We met, I moved to Silicon Valley 30 years ago, and Jim and I met at the second startup I worked at called ComScore back in the day. And then he joined me at Adify, and we started Dynamic Signal together. And then we started this company a little more than a year ago. And look, my general perspective is every time a lot of money moves into a category, as we've seen happen with AI, there's an opportunity. There's really a need in the market, and there's an opportunity if you're smart about it to build a very meaningful third-party measurement company. And so that's been really our goal with Laridan's to help build the company that matters for measuring AI, and that means a whole variety of things that we can talk about. So the first product we launched is a product called Scout that companies deploy to help them understand what's actually happening internally around AI in their organization. How are their employees using it? A whole bunch of things I can obviously talk about, but that's really what it is today. It's a tool for CIOs and CFOs to understand, hey, we bought all of this stuff. We bought all of these tools we know about, A. B, there's a ton of tools being used by our employees that we don't know about. Who's actually using it? What are they actually doing with these tools? Are they using them the way they're supposed to? Are they using their corporate accounts versus their personal accounts? So there's a bunch of policy work there. And then really what matters is how proficient are they? What are they using these for? And is it driving productivity? Right. At the end of the day, it's nice to have counting, but what you really care about is, are all of these tools making my employees more productive? By department, by region, what's working, what's not.
So subsequently, I actually wanted to know, for the very first time, when you show the executive the real AI usage data for the very first time, what actually surprises them the most?
It depends on our customers. First of all, what I will tell you is for most of our customers, for every one tool they know about that they bought, there's another two that are being used by their employees that they didn't know. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It doesn't mean it's, spyware from some foreign country that they should be worried about. It's just more about if these tools are unmonitored, you can't possibly learn from them. And one of the things I highlight to people is, look, we're trying to do this thing where we're effectively retraining the entire global workforce of knowledge workers, right? Normally things start in one industry, they start in Silicon Valley, they move slowly. This is everywhere around the world in every form of knowledge work. And so if you have these things that are untracked inside your enterprise, how are you going to learn? How are you going to understand? How are you going to optimize? So that's a big thing. That surprise of like the proliferation. There'll generally be a bunch of concern about is anyone actually using these tools? And as you'd imagine with anything, the usage tends to be much more spotty than you'd hope. C, there's a giant amount to do on proficiency, right? There tends to be these tools are amazing, these tools are powerful, but in a lot of ways, it's just like any other organizational transformation effort, which is you can't just deploy a tool and hope your employees will use it well, share best practices, and change their entire workflow overnight. And so I would say that what our customers generally find is there are a subset of folks using these very well, and it's really changing their life. But that
Right.
is a subset, number one. And then number two, like I said, the variety of tools tends to be far greater than they imagine.
Okay, awesome. And like companies are spending, heavily on the hype of AI for the
Sure.
last 2 years. Yeah. And now you have, actually the usage data. What is the biggest lie these leaders are actually telling themselves?
Oh, I don't really know that it's a lie. What I would
Mhm.
say is I think everyone knew normally when new
Mhm.
technology comes around, it takes a long time for large companies to adopt the technology. They try out very small pilots just in an innovation group. And
Mhm.
AI hasn't been like that at all. We all
Mhm.
inherently know it's so interesting and so exciting, and there's so much consumer pull from your own employees. There's so much top-down pressure from your board, from your private equity owner, from Wall Street, from whatever, that what you've seen is people have just launched tons of experiments and spent a ton of money. And so what I would say is I don't think it's particularly surprising that we're now getting to the part of the cycle where people have said, great, we've tried all of these things. Let's understand what happened. Let's figure out what's working. Let's optimize. So I don't know that there's any single, oh no, actually AI is all a fad. That's not true at all. It's wonderful. It's amazing. Its impact is not uniformly felt across the organization by department, by tool, by company. And so what I would say is it's not one aha, it's a series of hundreds of to-do lists. What do we really do? Because if you're talking about a company with 80,000 employees, with 50,000 employees, even with 500 employees, like I said, organizational transformation is real work. It's not just, hey, we bought ChatGPT Enterprise, let's hope it works well.
Exactly. So, and you also mentioned the term, shadow AI, like, purchasing your own, AI tools all the time. How big is the problem and what should leader know about that in 2026?
So what I would say is I think shadow AI is this interesting term that the industry uses, and it's fine. I
Mhm.
don't really love it as a term. I think it's more interesting to talk about unmonitored. I would say it this. What we generally find with our customers is when they find out that they didn't know about two-thirds of the AI tools being used in their org,
Right.
sometimes they're worried because of pure data governance and security. And that is obviously an issue with certain tools in certain areas in certain industries. But frankly, beyond that, like I said, there's a big question of if you're going to run these experiments, if you're going to actually let 1,000 flowers bloom inside your organization, fantastic. But you can't do that and not learn from what's happening there. So if you're not tracking and understanding and taking those learnings and feeding them back into your organization, how can you possibly get better? So what we find with a lot of our customers is, they'll find a lot of mundane things like why are we using 7 different AI note takers? We should
Right.
just standardize on one. Let's get rid of those. You will occasionally find, oh my gosh, we did not realize that engineering or that sales was uploading all of this stuff through personal accounts. There's a giant issue. There's a reason we sign non-data retention, but 60% of the usage of our tools winds up happening through people's personal accounts just because, people are used to using ChatGPT. So they use their, Amir at gmail.com instead of their, PureLogics.com email
Mhm.
that they're supposed to. So like I said, it's hundreds of things like that. It tends not to be, oh my God, we found out about 90 unregistered tools, shut them all down. It tends to be, we found out about 90 unknown tools. What can we learn from them? 50 of them are duplicative. Let's stop wasting money. Flat out, like number one, let's stop wasting money. And then of the 40 remaining, 20 are dangerous. Okay, shut those off. But of the other 20, these are amazing. These are really impactful for marketing. Let's take those learnings and let's turn that into training for the rest of the marketing organization.
Awesome. So it seems like you are saying that we should not block the shadow AI, but we should remain vigilant. So let's say like,
Look,
yeah.
like I said, whether you should or shouldn't block it, what I'd say is it's case by case. What
Uh-huh.
is insane is having unmonitored things that you're not tracking, you don't know what's happening, and you're not learning. So if they're
Uh-huh.
valuable, wonderful.
Let's say, like majority of an employee are using obscure AI tool. Should that be banned or should that be, enterprise next purchase, in your opinion?
Look, I think at a minimum, the
Mhm.
CIOs have to know about it, make sure that they don't have any data issues, and make sure they're tracking what's happening there. right?
Mhm.
For purely from a liability standpoint, having these tools that have access to all of your internal data that you don't know about from a corporate level is insanity. Like I said, whether you should block them or just bring them into the fold, that'll be case by case based on is it driving actual productivity? Most of the CIOs that we deal with, and most CEOs start from the premise that their employees are good actors trying to just do a better job with their job and be more productive, right? They're not spies by and
Mhm.
large, that are trying to harm your company. The goal isn't to chide them. The goal is to learn what is working for them and direct it in a way that is safe for your organization.
Awesome. So we assume all the employees are using AI, but your data shows that 10x are better than the others. So is it a hiring problem, or is it a training or awareness problem?
No, 100% it's training. Part of it is awareness. Part of it is training. Look, part of it is you see this with ChatGPT. ChatGPT publishes a lot of consumer data, right? So let's
Right,
ignore
right.
the workplace for a second. You see this with consumer data. There's
Mhm.
some small set of people, and by the way, this is true for all the AI tools, but ChatGPT, a bunch of this is out there. Benedict
Right.
Evans has written about this a lot. There's a subset of people that use these tools multiple times a day, constantly, all day, every day. There's
Mhm.
another subset of people who have a ChatGPT account, and once a week they go in there and they use it as a Google replacement to check, what the Winter Olympics schedule is tonight on NBC or who won the Champions League last week. So, like I said, these tools didn't exist 2 years ago. There's
Mhm.
1 billion knowledge workers in the world, 2 billion knowledge workers in the world. Of course, they're not all going to retrain themselves and reshape their workflows overnight. By the way, that's assuming that all the tools make sense in various departments. So I would say it's unimaginable to me to think that you'd be an engineer
Mhm.
not leveraging some of these AI coding tools unless you're in a very specific industry where it's blocked for some reason, right? Where the company has to, for
Mhm.
some reason, block these tools. I'm sure that exists. So it's unimaginable to me that you'd be an engineer not experimenting with these tools. But we even see that with usage data where there are developers using them, 50 times more than other developers. And so I guess you can say it's a hiring problem, but we're not going to have a world where companies fire everyone in their organization over 35 and just replace them with young AI native people. Like that is not going to happen. Like
Mhm.
anything else, we're going to have to train people and make sure they understand best practices. But you can't do that if you have all of these unmonitored tools. You're not learning what makes people more productive, right? One of the reasons we've done so well is we're not
Mhm.
coming in and telling people to stop what they're doing. We're
Right.
coming in and telling people, listen, you're spending more money than you've ever spent in any category ever at a speed faster than you've ever spent. Let's make sure you're tracking it, you're understanding, you're learning from it, you're driving it back into strategy, you're, pruning the tools that don't make sense and tripling down on the tools that do with real concrete, hey, brand marketer,
Mhm.
these are the 3 tools that are really working well for your colleagues to make them more productive. Let's make sure you understand that. But by the way, there's huge demand from HR for this. So one of the things you hear, they're not our customers. We spend a decent amount of time with HR leaders. They're not our direct buyers. We spend a decent amount of time with HR leaders. And a big thing you will hear from those folks is, hey, look, we have all of these employees. They're worried they're going to use AI wrong and get fired. They're worried they're not going to use it enough and they're going to get fired. They're worried AI is going to take their job regardless of what they do. What do we tell them? And that's why
Mhm.
a big focus of ours is like, let's figure out what is working for your organization so that you can train it, so that you can make the resources available for employees that do want to do the hard work to retrain themselves.
Got it. And I think, like, I mean, I actually wanted to ask you, like, if an employee refuses to adapt the AI, like, what is your stance on that? Like, should we fire them or should we train
I,
them?
I guess I mean employee refusing to, it depends on the job, it depends on the function, it depends on whatever. I
Yeah.
wouldn't think of it as this way. Like there's no such thing as people who work in FP&A refusing to use Excel or
Mhm.
people that work in sales refusing to use Salesforce. And I do believe in the future there will be no such thing as developers that refuse to use,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, in my case, it took me so much time to actually, guide my engineers to, start adapting AI because, they felt that if they started using it, they're going to have, like sitting idle or they will have a rust on their mind. They will not be able to learn. So it took me so much time actually.
of course, but a year from today, 2 years from today, there's not going to be any such thing as an engineer. Like
Right.
as I said, there's no such thing as a CFO that refuses to use Excel. So,
Mhm.
I mean, sure, is there some theoretical world where you're going to have to fire an employee who refuses to use a tool? Sure, but that's like any other form of ups, in
Right.
all honesty, right? Like my general perspective is of course AI is an amazing opportunity. Of
Right.
course, it's also a risk for certain employees, and it is uncomfortable if
Mhm.
you're an employee who's gotten to a point in your career where you didn't think you had to spend a lot of time on continuing education and learning new tools, I'm sure it is quite uncomfortable to now have to learn a whole new set of tools. I'm sure that is true. With that said, that is true. That just is reality. So sure, I imagine over time, there will be best practices in an organization, and employees that refuse to use it will, not really have good career opportunities. But like I said, that's like saying we're not going to use Excel in this organization. Like that doesn't exist.
Got it. Okay. Laradin measures real productivity. What is the most counterintuitive things you have found so far about ROI in your data so far?
Oh, I don't know that anything we found is counterintuitive. I think really
Mhm.
what I tend to focus on things that people weren't monitoring at all. So maybe it's counterintuitive. It's more things that people weren't monitoring at all. So we have certainly found these are the workflows within AI that are being used by the people in your org that are 10x more productive, right? So the biggest thing has been more, actually, I mean, maybe let me step back. Maybe I would say this is counterintuitive. It depends. I think I spent so much time in the kind of organizational transformation space, it didn't seem counterintuitive to me. What you find is a giant dispersion among actual usage. What you find is the more productive employees are now 10x more productive than they were before because they're
Right.
real power users of these tools. And so that's why we're so focused on let's help you understand what is happening in your organization so you continue to drive more change. So there's no headline of, oh, it turns out that Gemini doesn't work. No, it does work. It works very well as long as you're using it the right way. And it winds up being a real training and usage data of constantly mining what's happening.
Very interesting scenario I have on my mind. So let's say an employee spends 2 minutes prompting AI and saving 2 hours of their work, and that's a win. And if they spend 2 hours prompting to save 10 minutes of work, that's a loss, right? How does a company mathematically tell the difference between working and tinkering?
There's an interesting question
Mm,
around productivity, which is who gets the productivity gain, right?
mm,
If I'm an employee and I used to spend 8 hours, let's say I spend 8 hours a day working diligently, I'm a very good employee and I spend 8 hours a day and I do my job and I do a great job. If I can use AI tools to get all of that work done in 4 hours, there's an interesting question around if I get all that work done in 4 hours and I spend the next 4 hours watching Netflix, though I have become more productive,
mm,
my company has not become more productive. What has happened is my company has stayed exactly the same level of productivity, but
mhm.
is spending more because they're now paying for the tools I use. So
Right.
there's going to be an interesting informal, I mean, it'll never be something, where like there's meetings about it, but there will be some reorganization of the way people think about work, where some of the savings, some of the time savings wind up getting given back to employees, and some of the productivity gains wind up being given back to the company because now, you know what, the most ambitious people are going to keep working 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, whatever, and they're
Mhm,
just going to do 3 times as much as the person next to them. So I
mhm.
do think there's an interesting question of the amount of work that can get done in a day is just much more. So what I would say, Amir, is we're not trying to do time tracking at the minute by minute level, right? We're
Mhm.
not trying to snoop on your employees. Look, there's always parts of the day where also people on their way home, back to the office from a meeting, stop and get a haircut. Like there are things people do. They check ESPN.com in their browser. Like this has existed forever. It also doesn't really matter with knowledge workers. What you're worrying about is, are they getting the work done that I expect out of them? I suspect what's going to happen with AI as people adopt more of our tools to understand the real productivity of their employees. I suspect what's going to happen is managers' expectations for what an employee can get done in a day are just going to rot, right? I suspect what will really happen is that this will take a year or two. But I think a big thing that will happen in 2026 is as I understand what work is being done, and as I understand what productivity really looks like for my AI employees, I'm
Mhm.
not going to go in and mandate you're going to use AI. Just
Mhm.
my expectations of a manager as a manager for what you can get done in a week are going to be higher.
Awesome. And do you believe there are early sign of, failure in AI transformation, like, through your software, do we get to know if the AI is about to fail in the company, in a particular organization?
Sure. It's not. I don't think of it as about to fail like this some giant tidal wave. Think of it this way: you've bought tens of tools or hundreds of tools.
Hmm.
They're being used by various people in various roles in various departments for various reasons. What people find with our software is some of those tools are not driving any productivity and they are useless and they were a mistake, and that's fine. They were
Hmm.
pilots, let's cancel them.
Right.
Some of those tools are very, very valuable.
Mhm.
for a subset of employees, but they're not being widely used. Great, let's really drive the organizational training. Let's really put our wood behind everyone in marketing. This has to be your new workflow. Like we've seen it work well for your colleagues. This has to be your new workflow. Learn from your colleagues and let's go. And so I would say it that way. I would say it this way, Amir. Obviously, if you're not tracking what is happening, you're not measuring what is happening, you're not
Mhm.
measuring what's driving productivity, what really matters, not usage, but real
Mhm.
productivity, and you're not feeding that back into training, of course your AI initiatives are going to fail. But
Right.
I honestly, I don't really blame the AI for that. Of course, some of the tools are garbage and they don't really work. Sure, I mean that's to be expected. But if you're not tracking and monitoring, you're never going to learn that. You mentioned a long, long, long time ago,
Mhm.
actually back in '96, the
Mhm.
company you didn't even mention in the introduction. I was the first guy at the first online ad network, back when online advertising was invented. And later I started an advertising technology company that got very big that we sold. There's this silly thing of, I think of this a little bit in that way. We don't say, if you try a million things with your online ads, you don't say, oh my God, online ads don't work. You say, these keywords are working well with Google, but these
Mhm.
keywords are overpriced. Our Facebook ads are working well, but only with this type of creative.
Mhm.
The ads I'm running on Reddit aren't working. I don't know. I'm just picking examples. My Twitter ads aren't, or X or whatever, ads aren't working at all. This
Mhm.
Yahoo sponsorship I did around fantasy football is actually working really well. Let's triple down on that next year. And so my point is kind of part and parcel of experimentation is measurement. And
Mhm.
what we found with AI, and one of the reasons we're doing well at Laridan is people are very excited to experiment with all of these AI tools because they know it will be valuable, but they haven't done any real measurement.
I would want you to actually, shed some more light on, measurable KPIs. So you mentioned about, the ads, and, we can see if the ad is being sold or not, right? But if AI Copilot is actually making a profit, like, can you give us a real-time example of productivity metric? And that isn't just a vanity number, and we get to know that, this AI Copilot is actually
Oh,
making.
sure. On the developer side, people are using our tools to understand
Mhm.
how much more quality code that
Mhm.
makes it into production that is
Mhm.
complicated, post bug revisions, how much
Mhm.
quality code is being written by engineer.
Mhm.
Absolutely, right? We see, we see developers inside organizations writing 10 times more code, right? We see sellers that are heavy adopters of AI having 5 times more discussions with client or contacts with clients where there's real meaningful discussion in a month. For sure. I mean, you see it everywhere in the organization. You see it from a content standpoint. You'll see this very effectively in the marketing side, where people are now testing instead of 10 different creatives a week, they're testing
Mhm.
300 creative a week. Right. So, of course, I mean, the impact of AI in these industries, what's the line? The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. I think that's the right way to think about AI inside an organization is let's monitor what works so you can figure out what you should be pushing to push more even distribution to bring the productivity of my entire org up a level. I think people misunderstand when they say, oh, we haven't seen giant productivity gains from AI. I think what is true is for medium and large companies, small companies are different. Companies like mine are very different.
Mhm.
Oh, growing Silicon Valley companies that are AI first. It is true that you're not seeing massive AI efficiencies for massive companies today. That is not because AI isn't very valuable. It is
Mhm.
because normal human dynamics still apply, and it takes people a very long time to activate. But in every one of our customers, they've found real giant productivity gains for a small subset of their employees with a subset of tools. So, I mean, the developer example I mentioned is a real one. The sales example I mentioned is a real one. The marketing example I mentioned is a real one.
Right. So, what do you see? Like, what are the intentions of the companies when it comes to AI? Are they buying the new tools to make money, or they are just trying to save the money, like, focusing on laying off the people? And what are you actually seeing?
So I don't know that we really know that. And look,
Mhm.
honestly, I'm not sure they know that. It also
Mhm.
depends. Look, this is not a great answer, obviously. It
Mhm.
depends on the company. There are
Right.
certainly a set of companies, I'm sure you know these companies well, who they're
Mhm.
looking at AI saying, I'm going to be able to grow faster. And you see this all the time in, technology startups. You see truly the fastest growing companies in, human history are the AI companies, in a very couple sectors in Silicon Valley started in the last couple of years. So
Mhm.
there are people using it saying, we see this with Laridan. We were going through a product roadmap review yesterday, and
Mhm.
in I've run a lot of companies for a long time. We're having a things that would normally be 12-month roadmaps collapsed into 10-week roadmaps, 6-week roadmaps with the same number of developers, right? So there are a certain set of companies that are using these tools as real rocket fuel. Of course, there are more mature businesses and slower growth industries that are going to use these tools to fire a bunch of people. Of course, that is true, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it really depends. But by the way, that has been true forever. Let's take out the word AI and let's use the word outsourcing, right? It used to be the only way you could build your company was hiring great developers in Silicon Valley. And
Right.
first of all, they were expensive, so you're constrained in how many you could hire. And second of all, they were hard to hire because it was very competitive. And then people realized you could hire a lot of great developers in Lithuania and Serbia and India and right. And there's cost to that, right? This integration cost to that. There is a larger talent pool. And so what did people find? They found that by using talent around the whole world, some people used outsourcing as a way to fire a lot of Americans and cut a lot of costs.
Right.
Some people used outsourcing as a way to, for the same amount of money, accelerate their roadmap. Because instead of having 10 developers in Silicon Valley, I have 7 developers in Silicon Valley and 15 developers in China. Right. And so, companies like Zoom used outsourcing to accelerate their innovation cycle. Zoom could have never been built if they had to hire Silicon Valley engineers. It would have been too expensive. They wouldn't have been able to hire that many. Right. A huge part of their success was they were able to hire hundreds of engineers in China. And just because the talent pool existed. So I think of AI as, look, it's that on steroids or hypercharging that or whatever analogy you want to use. But it's not like we haven't seen this idea before with expanding talent pool to the global talent pool, which has coordination issues, has training issues, can be used to drive down costs, right? Why do I move my call center from Texas to Bangladesh? Well, I want to fire a bunch of people and save a bunch of money, right? That is a reason, right? That is a thing people have done. But also, the other side of it is some companies did it because it was so hard to hire enough people in Texas that I couldn't answer enough phone calls. And I realized I could hire enough people in Bangladesh where I could answer far more phone calls, right? And so at the end of the day, some people are going to use AI to hypercharge a business that instead of growing at 50% can now grow at 80%. And instead of having 30% margins, can have 40% margins. And some people are going to use it to fire a bunch of people. All right? It's going to depend on the industry. It's going to depend on the category. But my mental model for this is we've gone through this over the last 30 years with the globalization of workforces. And I think that's the right way to think about AI. Just it's happening very, very, very quickly and, with infinite scalability.
Awesome. And you mentioned about the roadmap. Would you tell our viewers about, a little bit the Laridan roadmap for the next 1 or
Sure,
2
you
years?
you will
Yeah.
you will see us build a lot more tools that are real department level integration. So, Scout, our product today, is really something that sits across an entire organization, but we're building a whole set of tools for sales, for engineering, for marketing, for finance, for FP&A, for hiring, for all of those. And so our goal is to provide, this, organizational intelligence for productivity of all of these AI tools for your humans, for agents, for all of that. And so that's really what we'll work on over the next 6 months is just a lot more integration, a lot around kind of getting deeper into the plumbing for our various customers to provide them more insight.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's the wrap of today's episode. I wish you all the best and thank you so much. And thank you
Thank
for
you.
the insights. There are so many takeaways from this discussion, but one of the key takeaways which I notice is that, measure if the AI is working for your company or not. Thank you so much, Russell. Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Awesome.